My mom kept her distance from me for years. Now, the truth was revealed. It shattered me. I'm 25 now, but this story really begins when I was 20, when I finally understood why my mom had always seemed to love my twin sister more than me. Growing up, our family was just the three of us, my mom, my twin sister Olivia, and me. No dad in the picture. Whenever I'd ask about him as a kid, Mom would just say he went away a long time ago. I remember the last time I brought him up. Mom's face went completely blank, and she said in this chilling voice, "If you ask about him one more time, you can go find him yourself. Don't have to stay with me." I never mentioned him again after that. The distance between Mom and me grew so gradually that I can't pinpoint exactly when it started. But looking back, there were countless small moments that built up over the years, each one a tiny brick in the wall between us. Like when I was 8, and I made her a Mother's Day card with a drawing of our family. She smiled at Olivia's card for what felt like hours, but mine barely got a glance before being tucked away in a drawer. I found it later, untouched, when I was looking for batteries. The physical distance was the hardest to bear. Mom would hug Olivia spontaneously, wrap an arm around her shoulders while they watched TV, or brush her hair back from her face with such tender care. But with me, every touch seemed calculated, brief, almost clinical. When I had a fever at 13, she'd check my temperature and bring medicine, but there was none of the gentle forehead kisses or hand-holding that Olivia got when she was sick. By high school, the pattern was set in stone. Mom would attend all of Olivia's volleyball games, cheering from the stands, but she always had a headache or was too busy with work when I had a debate tournament. The dinner table became a kind of battleground of silence. Mom and Olivia would chat about their days, share inside jokes, plan weekend activities. I'd try to join in, but my comments would be met with brief acknowledgments before the conversation shifted back to exclude me. Eventually, I stopped trying. I'd shovel food into my mouth as quickly as possible and excuse myself to do homework. When I started working part-time at the local grocery store, it almost came as a relief. At least I had a legitimate reason to be absent from family dinners 3 nights a week. But even then, the contrast was stark. If Olivia had to work late, Mom would save her a plate, keeping it warm in the oven. When I came home late, I'd find empty dishes in the sink and leftovers, if there were any, cold in the fridge. Thank God for Olivia. She'd always try to save something for me, wrapping it carefully, and sometimes even leaving little encouraging notes. Olivia was my saving grace through all of this. We had that special twin bond you hear about, finishing each other's sentences, knowing what the other was thinking with just a look. She never let Mom's obvious favoritism come between us. Instead, she became my protector in a way, always trying to include me in family activities, speaking up when Mom's behavior was particularly unfair, leaving me little gifts or notes to make up for Mom's coldness. I remember one night after a particularly brutal family dinner where Mom had completely ignored my news about getting into the National Honor Society. Olivia snuck into my room with a smuggled piece of cake and a card she'd made herself. "You're the best brother anyone could ask for," she'd written. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." I still have that card tucked away in my desk. As we got older, the distance between Mom and me seemed to take on a physical presence in our house. It was like we were doing an elaborate dance, always moving to avoid being in the same room alone together. If I came into the kitchen while she was cooking, she'd suddenly remember something she needed from the garage. If we passed in the hallway, her eyes would slide past me like I was a ghost. The night everything changed started normally enough. Olivia and I were having one of our movie nights, play fighting and throwing popcorn at each other like we were kids again. It had been ages since we'd let loose like this. Probably because any time I showed even a hint of roughhousing, Mom would appear like a ghost, hovering anxiously until I moved away from Olivia. But Mom was supposed to be at her book club that night, so we didn't hold back. We were wrestling over the remote. Olivia wanted to watch another episode of some crime show, while I was advocating for an action movie, when Mom walked in. Looking back, I should have noticed something was off. Her book club wasn't supposed to end for another hour, and she was clutching her purse like a shield. What happened next is burned into my memory. One second we were laughing, The next Mom had crossed the room in 3 quick steps and slapped me so hard I saw stars. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. Her hand left a burning imprint on my cheek, but what hurt more was the look in her eyes, like she was seeing something much worse than 2 siblings playing around. "Mom!" Olivia screamed, jumping between us. "What are you doing?" "He was hurting you," Mom said. But her voice was strange, distant. Her eyes weren't really seeing us. "We were just playing around," Olivia protested. "Like we always used to." But Mom had already turned and fled to her bedroom. We heard the door slam, then muffled sobbing. Not the quiet weeping we sometimes heard late at night when she thought we were asleep, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook the walls. Olivia and I stood frozen, both shocked into stillness. My cheek was still stinging, but the pain in my heart was worse. 20 years of rejection and distance had culminated in this moment of violence, and I felt something inside me break. What had I done to make my own mother hate me so much? Olivia grabbed my hand. "We need to talk to her," she said firmly. "This has gone on long enough." We found Mom curled up on her bed, shoulders shaking with sobs. When we knocked, she didn't tell us to go away, which was a first. Instead, she sat up slowly and patted the bed beside her. I hesitated. She hadn't invited me to sit near her since I was a small child, but Olivia pulled me forward. "There's something I need to tell you," Mom said, voice rough from crying. "Something I should have told you both a long time ago." What came next was like a dam breaking. Mom told us about her childhood, about the stepfather who had sexually abused her for years, about his sons who had joined in. She told us how she'd survived by shutting down, by teaching herself not to feel anything at all. How even decades later, being around men made her skin crawl with remembered terror. "Even my own son," she whispered, looking at me directly for what felt like the first time in years. There were tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I tried so hard not to let it affect how I treated you, but I couldn't. I couldn't separate you from those memories. Every time you got close to Olivia, every time you played rough or spoke loudly or moved too quickly, all I could see was them. And I knew you weren't them. I knew you would never hurt anyone, but my body wouldn't listen to reason." Everything clicked into place. The distance, the cold shoulders, the flinching when I got too close. It wasn't about me at all. I wasn't a bad son. She wasn't a bad mother. She was a wounded person doing her best to survive, raising a son who reminded her of her worst trauma. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Olivia asked softly. Mom wiped her eyes. "I thought I could handle it on my own. I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could be normal. But watching you two tonight, seeing you play fight like that, it was like being thrown back in time. And I know you would never hurt your sister, but in that moment, you were protecting her," I finished. "Like no one protected you." She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "But in trying to protect her, I hurt you. I've been hurting you your whole life, and I don't know if you can ever forgive me for that." I thought about all the years of rejection, all the times I'd cried myself to sleep wondering what was wrong with me. But I also thought about the strength it must have taken for her to raise a son at all, to face her fears every day just by living in the same house as me. "I think," I said slowly, "that we can start over, but we need help. Professional help." That night, Olivia and I stayed with her. We curled up on either side of her like we used to do during thunderstorms when we were little. None of us said much. What was there to say? But something had shifted. Some terrible weight had lifted now that the truth was out in the open. The healing process wasn't quick or easy. Mom started therapy first, individually, working through decades of buried trauma. After a few months, her therapist suggested family sessions, and that's when the real work began. The healing didn't happen overnight. Mom started therapy, and eventually, Olivia and I started going with her. We learned about intergenerational trauma, about how pain can echo through families like ripples in a pond. Olivia would sometimes manufacture reasons to leave Mom and me alone together, giving us space to build the relationship we should have had all along. Mom tried too. She'd ask about my interests, my friends, my dreams. Sometimes I could see her fighting against her instincts, forcing herself to stay present when everything in her wanted to run. But she stayed. She fought. She loved me the best way she knew how. Today, 5 years later, our relationship isn't perfect, but it's real. Mom still has triggers, still has days when she needs space. But now she can tell me directly, "I'm having a hard day," instead of just avoiding me. I've learned to read her cues, to understand when to give her distance and when to stay close. We've developed our own traditions now. Sunday dinners are sacred. All three of us cook together, laughing and talking about our week. Mom and I have a standing coffee date every Wednesday morning before work. She comes to my software company's events, and I help her tend her garden on weekends. I learned something important through all this. Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves about why people act the way they do are completely wrong. Sometimes what looks like hatred is really fear. What looks like rejection is really protection. And what looks like a broken family is really one trying its best to heal. And sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't grand gestures or perfect parenting. It's simply staying, trying, and being willing to face the truth together, no matter how much it hurts.